welcome back with also us, Darren and Keith from the Startup Weekend Global Organizing Team. We're really grateful to have a couple of white guests today, once again, in other sections, to do some sharing for all of us. We know it's really tough to actually kickstart the whole startup journey, so it's good to actually have some people, the big names in the Web3 space, to help you, shape you about like how to win the game, and also like how to really execute your ideas way beyond this hackathon, right? So today we have a guest, Darren. You should be very familiar with him because he also helped us to hold that section about business model. Before we kickstart, let's do really self-introductions about yourself, and then I'll allow you to roll the whole game.
Yeah, not a problem. Hi, folks. My name is Darren Rogan. I'm originally from Ireland and I now live in Australia. I have been doing startups for the past 15 years. I've raised over $80 million USD. I've had several exits. I live on the Gold Coast down in Australia. I run the Gold Coast blockchain meetups, and I'm involved in several Web3 businesses, including charity DeFi. I did NFT fractionalization platforms, NFT projects. I'm wearing my Moonbird hat. I'm a big fan of the whole NFT craze. But at the same time, I've been around business for quite some time, grant assessor, all that sort of jazz, startup accelerators. And the big point of all of this is that we are looking to solve problems, okay? Because that is a very important. The technology is great, but the technology is here for a purpose. We're going to help you with that today. All right, Keith, would you like me to take it from here and start doing the presentation?
Sounds excellent. I know you prepared something for all of us. Let's go ahead.
Right, let me just share my screen and then I will start the presentation. So the first presentation we're going to have, we've got about 45-minute presentation. Can everyone see this? Keith, can you see the slides?
Yes, very clear.
Yeah, good, perfect. So we're going to do about a 45-minute presentation. I've got quite a few slides to get through on customer validation. This is a very important set of slides, but it's also very useful for any venture beyond this weekend. So please, take the lessons from this as best you can. I'll try to run through this in about 45 minutes. And then we'll do questions and answers for about 15 minutes through the chat system in Gather Time, which is on the bottom right-hand side. And I'll start going through those. I won't see those questions until after I finish and get to the Q&A section. So you can put a question in, but I won't see it until afterwards. All right, let's get going. This is the customer validation workshop. Okay, next. And I am Darren Rogan, at Darren Rogan on Twitter if you want to see me post about about crypto continuously and other random stuff. I've been involved in quite a few ventures, as you've heard me say before, so we won't go too far into this. But yeah, I speak at some conferences. I've spoken at the Australian Crypto Conference. I was at Singapore Token 24. I'm going to the Proof Conference. So I'm in the business and I do Web3 for a living. All right, this is the hashtag. If there's anything that you see that's interesting or you want to tweet a nugget of information, please use the Startup Weekend Global hashtag for this and any other events. I know it says Saturday workshops, but unfortunately we couldn't do it on Saturday. So let's get into it today. Customer validation. All right, now Steve Blank, the king of customer validation, has a very famous saying, which is, more startups fail because of a lack of customers than a failure of product development. And this is so true, folks. I have spent years of my life building products that rarely see the light of day. If you are not actually building the best product in the world and no one ever sees it, then it's valueless at the end of the day. Too many people in the Web3 space in particular are building technology solutions without actually having problems. So let's get going. Why do new businesses fail? Very clearly, they build a product or service that no one wants. So let's ask questions to our users. Well, before we do that, we really need to set some goals, okay? Because if you have just a single conversation with someone, you take some information from it, but realistically, we want to understand the customer base as a whole. So we want to say, right, I'm going to interview, let's say 20 people, or let's say 100 people. Out of this 100 people, before I start, let me say what I think the success rate should be. This is very important to do before you engage in any sort of conversations, because we really want to understand what we think beforehand, and before we start engaging, because it's very easy to look at data after the fact and rationalize, rather than actually setting that goal to start with. So a great example would be, I'm going to ask 100 people, and out of that 100 people, I expect at least 10% to say that this is a problem for them in this sector that I'm going to go have a look. This hypothesis is what we were just talking about, as in, what is it that I'm trying to find out? And what is it that I really want to know about? How do we measure this? How do we figure this out? Because at the end of the day, this conversation that we're going to have, or this, talking to our potential customer base, it's really about finding those insights that are going to help us build our business. So we really need to start thinking about, what is it that we're trying to figure out? How do we figure those out? And with that, and the goal setting is about setting us up for success, because too many times people just have rambling conversations and you can't compare and contrast, and you then start trying to not validate your assumptions and not have a hypothesis about what you should think in a structured way that you can get insights from, but you have a very unstructured conversation and it's very hard to compare. Review progress is massively important. I have seen this over and over. I was involved in multiple startup accelerators. I've been a startup weekend facilitator for about 4.5 years, 5 years. A lot of the times, if you don't do this beforehand, I know I'm harking on about this, people will change the goals to fit the information that they receive. Okay, and that is not good to start the basis of discovery and decision making. If you start moving the goalposts around already, it's very difficult for you to actually determine your progress and whether or not you're going down the right thing. So categorize your cohorts, understand the type of customer, and if they fit inside your hypothesis. So now we go and we start doing some forms and we start sending everything out, emailing people, and get all this beautiful feedback about, would you use this product in the future? Do you think that this is the service we would use? Strongly agree, disagree, sample size of 400. Very easy to do. Should we do this? No, we should not do this. Absolutely not. Because the problem that we have in the example we just give is that it's very unclear where the insight is coming from, and it's very leading the potential customer into a set of agreements. And then we think we've got insights when in actual facts, we've just correlated what we want. What we really want to do is sometimes called a customer discovery interview. So this term was actually coined by Steve Blank, and it used to be, and it's inside a larger academic framework because he is an academic. Now, I'm an entrepreneur. I have done stuff at universities with the MBA program and stuff, and I understand the theory that they're in, but it's quite a large, complex theoretical framework. But this is one of the best parts of it, of this lean business canvas, lean startup approach that Steve Blank in particular pushed heavily. And you have other people who've sort of taken on that mantle. And we'll talk about a recommendation for a book, which I believe is the most tangible mechanism to describe this without that academic overhang that you sort of need to understand before you can figure out what it's useful. This is actually physically talking. Well, Zoom's fine as well, folks, but actually talking to individuals. There is so much knowledge that can be gleaned from talking to people. And if you just sent me a multiple choice question, you're barely getting any information, if any useful information at all. And we've not even spoken about the actual question types at this point. But this is a critical step in the entrepreneurial journey to try to understand why and what you're doing. So I like to call it the KYC that matters. Know your customer. As anyone in Web3 knows, KYC is used all the time. But we really need to understand who we're building these products for, what they want, and how we're going to do it. So I would always say, like, who is the customer? A lot of the times people get hung up on what might be a user, and the user might use your system or might use your product, but they may not be the person who actually has the financial flows. So you really need to understand the customer as in, the person who's going to pay the money or get that value from this in order for them to get the benefit. And if you can't quantify your paying customers, then you're going to be in for a world of hurt. Too many people just chase the user, because if you think about it, you could be an employee in a company and you are the user of that product. Now, you may want features and functions that would make your life as a user easier. And me as a product builder might build those features and functions for you, but the customer, being your boss, will not pay any money for those features and functions to make your life better, because they don't see that as an expense that they're willing to pay. So you need to really understand that payer as well as the underlying user in these sort of discovery interviews where you're having these conversations. Now, I know that a lot of times that may be the same people, but very regularly it's not. And we need to really comprehend this when you're doing these conversations. Number two, how do I actually get in front of them? So I was a EIR, entrepreneur in residence, at an accelerator program, and I had one startup doing fitness stuff. So it was called Park Fit, and they couldn't get any customer discovery interviews because they were expecting people to just stop and give them anything. So they said they couldn't get anyone. So I said, you give me $10 and I will get you 10 results within 15 minutes. And they said, no way. I said, I'm telling you, give me $10 and I'll get you 15 results. So you know what I did? I went to the shop. I bought a bunch of cold water bottles out of the fridge, and I went to the park and I put a sign up and said free water, and people who were running through stopped. And I said, would you like a free water, and can we ask you a couple of questions? So within 5 minutes, I had the 10 because people stopped for the free water. We were delivering them value to get in front of the customer that we want. So I'm not suggesting that you go give out free water bottles to everyone, but I'm suggesting you need to think about, how do I actually get in front of the potential customer base, and try to think about that in ways where you're actually being beneficial, or that you're going to get them to stop and give you the time of day. One big point is spot questions. We have been trained in civil society to be nice to one another. Okay, so if you ask someone a spot question, you're very likely to get an answer about not hurting your feelings. And those spot questions were like, would you do this, or would you buy my product? What you normally get is that somebody will say, I would buy your product, but, and their buts you may misinterpret to be that you need to build features and functions. And what they're really saying is, I don't want to buy this now, but I don't want to upset you. So I'm going to try to find something you don't have, so I can have a get out of jail free card like Monopoly, and I can get out of this without actually truly giving you truthful answers. So try not to put people in spot questions, because the information flow that you get out of it is generally very bad. One very important part, which I don't think is clearly articulated, is the customer problem statements are just gold. They're not gold for right now, but they're gold for a little bit in the future. And the reason they're gold is, if a customer is able to explain their problems and in their language, in their terms of reference, we can use that language when we want to sell to them later. And when they hear their problem spoken back to them in the words and phrases that they use, it resonates with them. So this helps future sales. So we really want to get this problem capture and the language, as well as the insights for customer discovery and building features. So there's like a double benefit here, which sort of goes outside customer validation into the later stage of how we sell products. So really capture that language. Sometimes I ask people, is it okay if I record this to share with my team members at home or at home back at the office, and I'll put my phone out and I'll record, and then I'll listen back to the interview afterwards to try to pick up those terms of phrases. And that copy can actually make a big difference. Okay, let's keep going. The founder's oath. Now, if we were in a room, I'd make you all say this, but because it's a one-to-many, you don't have to. I want you to, but you don't have to. I swear never to use online forums for validating new products or features. The issue with online forums is that I need to see the faces of my customers and I need to listen to them with my heart. Now, on that, my wife sometimes says to me, things are fine. Now, sometimes things are not fine, and sometimes things are fine. And if I can't see the face of my wife, I have no idea if that text message saying things are fine are truly fine. And if you take that into the business world, there's so much information that's being lost, and we really need to understand, is it yes, or is it a reluctant yes? Is it a positive yes? And it's really, really difficult without those reluctant answers versus active answers like, yes, I'd really love this, or I don't know, yeah, maybe, yeah, actually, yeah, I do want this. Like, that's a very different signal, which you will never get from a form. You'll only get from that direct conversation. And one other point I would make is in this early exploratory mode, this customer validation-y stuff, you will not have necessarily the time to do this later, or the one-on-one sort of learnings when you get to a larger size. So realistically, this is the time for you to learn your customer from head to toe. Okay, interview. Interviews are really great. You've heard me talk a lot about them, but they need to be done well. Because if they're done wrong, sometimes the wrong information is worse than no information. Right? Everyone lies, right? You know, when your partner asks, do I look fat in this dress? When I say to my wife, I don't want to go out for drinks with the lads, I'm lying, right? And they're little social lies. So they're not lying to you because they want to deceive you. They're lying to you because they don't want to hurt your feelings. So they're not trying to be bad or mean, but they just aren't trained to be giving you candid feedback. The majority of people just don't do that. They love you, yeah. And so the people who know you in particular, your family, we're going to talk about a book called The Mom Test later, and I love that example because your mom loves you and she'll tell you things like you're great, you're special, you're beautiful, and it's all because they love you. Whether or not that's an objective truth, that's a different story entirely. So we're hammering home this point, but it is a very important point. The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick, he went through Y Combinator, if I remember correctly, and I find that he's really distilled the concept of customer discovery interviews, and he's pulled out all of the academic framework and applies it in a very concise way. I recommend this book for any founder to be able to help you write non-leading questions. The last person I give this to is a company I'm an advisor on, and that was about 3 months ago. I bought this book and I literally give it to them. And I recommend this book time and time again, and it is one of the best books for anyone starting businesses about how to ask questions in a way to get the maximum information out and remove as much biasry as possible. So big fan. It's a small book too. It's not a very large book. It's on ebooks, or sorry, I think it's on Audible as well. So yeah, strongly recommend it. But the big point of this is, as they were saying, record the words that are used, is understanding your customer is extremely important to holistically understand them, because you may be trying to understand the value proposition that you're giving to them. But for example, that might seem valuable, but they may have a more pressing issue that sort of eclipses what you're looking for, and you may not know that. So I like to get people to say, is what, pardon me, is what I'm thinking about important to this potential customer base? So we want to start with problems, because we are deliverers of solutions. That solution might be solving your boredom problem, but you still need to articulate that you have a problem. One of the worst types of startup is a real problem that's not big enough for people to actually look for a solution. So it becomes a very difficult problem solution match, because it's a problem, but it's not a big problem. Yep. Sorry, does someone want to say something? All right, I think we just had some cross wires. All right, so the next thing that we do is when somebody talks about a problem, we really want to understand that type of problem and whether or not it's related to our solutions. So how did you, so one of the best things is like, when did it happen? How many times has it happened? And when's the last time it happened? We're trying to quantify how the frequency of the issue, how big of a deal it was for you, because we're trying to comprehend, how much demand there is for the solution of this problem. If I solve a problem that you only have once every couple of years, you're never going to buy a product or really engage with us. So, and we really want to understand the value that we're doing for you. Like, most pricing is value orientated. Show me the value that I can deliver, and I will try to charge less than the value I give to you. And in doing so, you create a very powerful opportunity for sales and growth. This about listen with your heart for where to read their body language is super important. You want them to talk as much as possible. So, I normally have some sort of script to make sure I ask a similar set of questions of everyone. I don't follow it. I have a natural language conversation, and I don't mean it with ChatGPT here, folks. I mean like just a standard conversation. But I want to make sure that I cover all the same subjects and all the same types of questions, so I can compare and contrast my multiple interviews to see if there are consistent patterns. And the other bit that I was mentioning about the knowledge, when people start talking about their problems, people generally like to talk about themselves, and they can drop really useful information that might be new features or functions or a way to get into the business or some other stuff. So it's good to let them carry on. Sometimes there's nuggets in the waffly long conversation that you just have to sit through. So active listening, be passive, because you just want that information to keep flowing, because you don't know when you're going to get that really useful nugget. So don't be in there and say, I got 5 minutes to skip through this question 1, 2, 3, 4. You're really going to limit that conversation and that information flow, because you want to suck as much information as you can out of their brains and understand their emotional interest as well. And forms just don't cut it, folks. This is very much an interpersonal thing. So once we've sort of, got an idea of what we want to do, we start to have our experiments. Like, does the customer even recognize the problem is a problem for them? And as I was saying before, people sometimes they may recognize it's a problem, but it's not a big enough problem. Now, we might think it's a problem because we only understand one aspect, but for them, they might say, well, that's not a problem at all, and we're not actually, we're not concerned with that. And you want to, imagine you could find that out today, not after spending, your life savings and spending 2 years of your life. So a lot of this is about taking a scientific approach of experimentation and trying to understand, am I on the right path? And if not, changing my aim quickly to try to get to the end, which is a product that the market wants, a solution that we can sell in a time frame that you don't run out of money, okay? Because you think about it, the more you can aim and re-aim, the more likely you're going to get to your target. Where if you spend a lot of time without being able to re-aim through designing these experiments correctly, then it's not going to be beneficial. Will they buy the solution? Can I build it? There are a lot of people have high expectations. So we have to try to understand where that value curve is, where we are delivering value, but realistically, if there's 2 of us or 3 of us in a startup, I can't compete with Google for certain feature sets. Well, that's in Gmail. Well, that's great, but Gmail's budget is 10 times what we have. So that's unrealistic at this stage. Excuse me. All right. So who are your customers? Very, very important. What is the market size? What would they pay for this? And how easy is it for you to find with the discoverability? This is extremely useful questions and information to be pulling out. Now you have to remember your customer is in the market that you want to be interested in. So they are also a massive value, not for the primary information, but for secondary information about market size, about what they think is valuable, what they would pay for, how they think the industry or the sector could be benefited. Because we might come with an idea about we're going to deliver value through feature one. And the reality, the business value that they're willing to pay for and that they see value in is actually feature 2 or 3 that we weren't even thinking about, but that's what resonates with that customer size. And this is this engagement where I'm able to qualify the problem, I'm able to qualify the frequency, I'm able to qualify the cost or value that they're able to pay. And if I speak to like 10 people, I get a good average. The more people we speak to, the better the clarity, assuming they're the right people. They are the customers. Because if I am not your customer, my opinion is irrelevant. No facts exist inside the building, only opinions. Now, I love this, and this is the thing from Startup Weekend where they tell you to get out of the building and go talk to people. As I described earlier with the water bottle, I could go through a whole bunch of examples. This is about getting in front of actual people. Okay, and asking. Now, as an entrepreneur, you're going to get rejected a lot because not everyone wants your product. But at the same time, you need to put yourself out there, and you want to get these problems, you want to get these information flow as early as possible. The earlier you get this information, the more flexibility you have with that knowledge. You don't want to spend a lot of time going down a path with no information, no customer validation, launch a product in the market that no one wants, and then figure that out. You lose a bunch of time and you lose a bunch of money, and you may lose the opportunity entirely. So if we built a product that solves problem X, would you use it? How much would you pay for something that did X? Would you like the existing solution better if it did X? This is feature focused. This is a big no. Do not do this. The reason is that you're framing the conversation into actual solutions. So you're moving from the conversation around having a good conversation around the problems, around the value, and they're trying to, and they're giving you business information to a point of a discrete question about a feature or a function. If I ask you, would you watch this movie? The answer might be yes, but would you go look up this, go to the cinema, look for this movie and go of your own accord? Probably not. But that's a massive difference, okay? And you would think then, oh, well, people are going to watch this movie, but just because they say it doesn't mean they would do it. And because they're put on the spot, now you're changing the dynamics of their behavior to be like, it's not front of mind, so I wouldn't do it normally, but because of our conversation, you pulled it front of mind, and now I'm going to act on the fact that you're the person instantiating this thought. But that thought isn't necessarily one that would naturally occur in your customer. So the golden rules: do not pitch your idea, right? You are not in selling your business mode. We are in understanding customer problems, understanding how much they want to pay for it, understanding the words that they use, and asking them as well, who else you think has got these types of problems? Do you know other people? They can even give you the market research about other people in the market that you didn't even understand, or maybe change your customer view entirely. You know, don't talk about the future, talk about their problems today. If this is a solution, if this is a problem, they already have a solution. That solution may be that they manually get a pen and a piece of paper. It might be that they outsource it to an individual. It might be that they just let it, ignore it, and you know, they don't have a proper solution at all, but they just deal with the consequences. So, you know, that would be very much not future states of what your product can do, but we really want to understand what we can do today. A lot of products I see, they have a early stage idea and they have a point in the future where it looks like everything's going to go really well. What we really need to understand is how do we get from where we are today to that final state? And we do that by delivering value to our customer base along the way in a stair step. Think of stairs. You know what I mean? You don't go from level 1 to level 2. There are some stairs along there. And those stairs, when you talk about the future, you're basically jumping straight to level 1. And what we really need to understand is what are the problems that you're interested in, which helps us build that staircase. And as I said, don't ask leading questions, because when you lead the question, you basically invalidated the information. I think you should, you should go to the gym. And I would agree with him. I would go to the gym. I don't go to the gym because I'm lazy, right? And if you ask me a leading question, the answer is yes, and yes, I will. But the realities of my customer behavior is I wake up and I'm lazy and I think no, and I stay up too late at night playing computer games, and in the morning I'm like, I'm not going for a run, I'm not going to the gym. So that's an example of how those leading questions would lead you down the wrong path. Okay, so think about leading questions, you're leading the customer down a path where it sort of invalidates most of the information. Now, you'll get this a lot with salespeople. You'll get this a lot with very enthusiastic, because they're like, look at what I'm doing. Look at my beautiful baby. Like, it's great. Look at this. I mean, they're going to lead you there. But I'll tell you this. I've never heard a parent say they've got an ugly baby, but I've seen a lot of ugly babies in the world, okay? So just consider that. And if you're leading that, you're not going to get that information flow. All right. It all starts with a problem. Like, real solutions are a problem. Normally they're making money, saving money, but there has to be a reason for your customer to take an action. Inertia, apathy, not caring about your product is the worst thing, because you may have a solution for them, and that sometimes it's like, I can't sell a digger to a guy who's too busy digging a hole, because it's not a problem that they're actually considering. So even though you've got a solution, it may not be interesting. Okay, just time check. All right, these are some great questions. What is the hardest part about X? What's the last time this happened? Why is it hard? The other bit that I like to ask is, what are your top 3 problems, if you know what I mean, to try to understand if the solution problem space is in the front of their thinking. And sometimes I might ask, do you have any problems over this way, or is this a concern that you guys have? Let's say it's around, retention. So, a great example of a blockchain solution is loyalty programs. We see a bunch of them. You see Starbucks. So that problem is retaining customers. I want to retain customers. So then at that point, we don't want to talk about that. We want to be like, okay, so why is it hard? Well, it's hard because, the cost of acquisition of a customer is so high, but I'm not getting a lot of return customer out of it, a lot of return business. So if I can hold on to that customer longer, then that's significantly better for us. But that's the problem. Like, the loyalty is the solution, but the problem is around, increasing the revenue per person. And if you let them go, then you have to find them again and convince them to come through the front door instead of being able to hold them around. Okay, so what, if anything, have you done to solve the problem? This is very important. Even if they use a competitor, or they do it manually, or they do these other things, I love this question, because if it's a real problem, they're going to be doing something about it. And it's, if you think about those ads that you see on TV, like those shopping ads, they say a string of problems. You know what I mean? Are you tired of doing X, Y, and Z to solve your problem? That copy basically comes right out of there. So I know this is about customer validation, but this double value here is just massive. And what don't you love about the other solutions that you've tried? Now, you have done a SWOT analysis, which is a market analysis of your competitors, and you think that you've got the best solution and you've got the best value on the market, but you want to ask them, because they are also evaluating that marketplace, what they don't love. So what don't you like about the competitors? You don't want to repeat those mistakes. You don't want to copy the bad decisions that they've made. Sometimes you see companies like directly copy another company, but sometimes that's not the right thing to do because you copy their mistakes as well as their successes. So yeah, it's very valuable. All right, we got 10 minutes to get through a few more, and then we'll get to Q&A. Okay, so what's the hardest part about getting food tourism packages? That's really, really difficult. And as I said before, that's really leading that person to a very distinct point. Now, do they care? Right. So we're right down to be like, what's the hardest part about XYZ? Now, XYZ may not be something that they even care about, but you've brought them right down to this point to say, okay, now I'm here, what do I care about? But if you didn't bring them there, this wouldn't be a concern. And if it's not a concern, that's unlikely that they're necessarily going to be a paying customer in the future. They're probably going to be just a tester, or they're probably just not going to do it because they don't think about it. Okay, so that's a very important part, is understanding the problem in their problem to needs. Because if it's not high enough up, they won't look for it, so it's very hard to sell, which means it's going to be significantly more expensive because you have to physically get in front of customers and say, hello, I'm here, and look at this solution to your problem. Now, if this is high on their problem area, they might be looking for a solution. So that means you can just put up a website and they will come to you. So then your marketing costs are significantly cheaper, so you've got a better business. And these are the sorts of things that we really want to understand. Okay. It's not big enough to have a problem if they aren't willing to solve it on their own. That's a very good example. As I said, that they will always have a solution. Sometimes they don't. They just ignore the problem. And if they just ignore the problem, will they pay for a solution? Realistically, probably not, because they're not willing to get a manual task or pay an employee to do something. And it's unlikely to do it on their own unless there's like a capability missing that you can bring to market that isn't available. Okay, your only goal now is to understand if there's a problem worth solving in the first place. I'm going to say that again. Your only goal now is to understand if there's a problem worth solving in the first place. What's the point of doing a startup if you're not going to get a return on your effort and time? You might as well just go and do some open source software and just join an existing project, because you really want to have this engine of sustainability. I'm a big fan of social enterprises, but as I remind people constantly, social enterprises is not charity work. Social enterprise is like a van that delivers, a social benefit, and the enterprise bit is the engine and the fuel tank, which enable it to touch everyone and to deliver that value. And if you don't have it, it will run out of fuel and it will not do the value that it's needed. So it is all important. All right, measure. How do we measure this? How do we actually determine what needs to be done? As I said before, we had, setting hypothesis, trying to figure out what that looks like. I, for example, had a set of questionnaire topics that I'd like to talk about with each individual. And then I might come back and then I might rank those after having a meeting. After my meeting, I'll get a piece of paper and I'll start writing out against question 1, question 2. I really do enjoy recording them if they're up for that. But in that, I can start to say, well, what interests this person? And then I start to put them in like an archetype, say, well, this might be a small business customer. This might be a large corporate customer. So what did the large corporate customers think about this? And was this problem in their top 5 problems? Yes or no? Was it? And at that point, you've got qualitative information being what you've discussed, and qualitative and quantitative, because we've kept a similar structure. So the measuring can be very beneficial there. So some more tips and hacks. Encourage stories. Tell me about a time where you had a problem. Tell me about a time where something went horribly wrong. When you're selling like a product that solves a problem, it generally has like 2 types of problems that it solves. It has a primary problem that happens all the time, and then it has what's called a black swan event, which is a very rare occurrence, but it generally has a massive impact. So when you're trying to sell a product later, you really need to understand that like the common value stories, that happen all the time, because that's the one that you can sell today. And then those black swan events is sometimes how you close the deal, to say like, we can deliver this value today, but if this scenario, which rarely happens, which means it's going to be discounted, we also save you from this, potential disaster. And that can really help on figuring those out, because you don't want to be trying to solve a problem with a customer about a story that only happens once a year. That's not going to be in there. And the stories also can help figure out, especially if you're selling stuff to multi-parties, who the other parties are and where that customer to user comes in. Okay, ask open-ended questions. Walk me through, show me how, tell me what you did today. How does that actually go? A lot of times we get used to asking direct, closed questions of yes and no's and rank from A to so far. If you do that, you're basically reducing the information flow dramatically to you, because those open-ended questions, a lot of times additional information, you're like, oh, I never heard that before. Oh, well, tell me more about this, tell me more about that, and digging into these open-ended questions, especially when people are a bit especially when people are talking for a while. A lot of times people are slow to release information, and as you have a longer conversation, ask more open-ended questions, they'll give you more information about previous questions because it's now in a more open way. And don't lead. Would you like this better? Do you do that? That's just wasting your time. These specifics about what's the worst thing, what's the best thing, is this in your top 10? That's very much trying to get back to that quantitative, because I want to be able to rank, like if I speak to 100 potential customers, I want to be able to know, these as well as those qualitative about, were they interested, were they not? So recording those and recording that interest, that sort of net promoter score feeling, which is like a ranking of how likely you are to recommend this to someone else. But what it really captures is like how interested you are. So like these are some really beneficial tips, which is hard to do, but the mom book has still got some good tactical examples. Ask why is another big one. Short questions, like you should not be talking a lot. Okay, you should be letting them talk. All right, and when we talk about the past or the present, tell me the last time. That this is very much about, you've got a problem. What is the frequency of that problem? Tell me, is it a recent issue? Is it something that only happens at a certain time of the year? Is it like a compliance thing that's end of month? Is it end of financial year? Like these parts are all extremely useful for you to qualify the problem. And number 8, give time to answer. Let people think. A lot of times people jump into this empty space and fill it because you feel uncomfortable. You need to let them fill it. Just sit there, nod, active listening, and just let them think about it. Let them, tell you what they want. Don't rush them. Give them as much time as you want. Don't cut them off. Don't get them too excited. It's very easy to jam and be like, oh, I love that. We've got a solution. We're going to do great things. We're going to make this thing. Like, don't. This is not about you. This is about this other person getting everything off their chest. Think of it like you're almost their therapist, right? You're there to get all this information as much as possible. Look for inconsistencies that those don't make sense through their stories, because that's very important if you're looking at a problem, because like one use case scenario goes this direction, one goes that direction, and if you didn't know that they overlap or they conflict, then your product value that you build for either are not going to work, because those inconsistencies is where some of that sort of value is is hidden. And as we said in number 10, give them time to answer again. Like it's very much that the other person needs to feel comfortable, and they need to give us time to consider their options in a time frame that works for them. And don't be afraid of silence. You just ask somebody a question, and if you want more information, just sit there silently, and a lot of times they'll just keep telling you stuff. Okay, and sometimes they'll tell you stuff they probably shouldn't, and that's fantastic. That's what we want to hear. Or they'll tell you that that it's unlikely, or and then when you're qualifying leads, you might come back to your customer interviews and say, well, because of the silence, then I got this additional information which might change them in an order of potential partnerships later. Customer validation, experience-based from real potential customers to make informed decisions. All right, this is so important to build real businesses and not build basically a project that may have a successful token launch but implodes a year later. Okay, because you really need to solve not the hype sale of a token, but the post sale of a token. What is the primary value and who is that customer? And if you don't get that right, it's all for nothing, folks. It'll all crumble. So coming to activities, you need a set of questions that you ask potential customers. You use them to validate when you're interviewing them. I normally have a class of questions. You can look up discovery question scripts. You'll see examples of them. The Mom Book's another great example of those. We're not going to do this activity because this activity is done in person and I can't see the screen because I'm sharing my screen, so I'm not going to get you to move left or right. Okay. What do you think about this idea? It doesn't matter if they like it. It matters if they have a problem that I'm after. Okay. Doesn't matter if they like it. They may hate it, right? But it's a problem that they pay for. Do you know what I mean? Like, no one likes to pay their taxes. But taxes solve problems that we want. So just keep that in mind. Would you buy this product or service? No, no, no. It's easy to say yes to a commitment in the future. Okay, so will you use this in the future? Oh, hell yeah, I'll use it in the future. No, I'm not going to use it, or I may use it, but I don't actually have to disappoint you to a point in the future, even if I want to say no. It's easier for me to say yes, but in the future to just push this conversation away, because most people are, averse from any sort of confrontation these days. Okay, will I pay for this? There's no examples of things that we don't want to do because they'll say they will. You know what I do in this example? I ask them for the $50. Give me the $50 and I'll do it for you, to see if they will actually take the money out of their pocket and give it to me. And then I'll give it straight back to them and say, actually, it's not ready. I just wanted to see if you would pay for this. Okay, because there's a big difference about saying you will do something and you actually do something. Okay, yep, these are some kind of immediately tells us if it's a customer or not, because if this problem hasn't happened to you at the problem space, then they're not a customer. So if they don't have these types of problems, their opinion is irrelevant for us for customer discovery. You know, I don't need a cheerleaders. I don't need a support group to come behind me going, you're awesome. You know what I mean? I don't need a cuddle. What I want is customers. So I only want to know what they think, and the rest of it doesn't matter. All right, let's keep going. This will allow you to understand your goals. I've went through that pretty quickly. I'm just trying to get through to the questions and answers. I think I'm pretty close here. Divide and conquer. That's also very useful to split up so you can get through a lot of people and talk to as many people as possible. Think about it. If I speak to 2 people or I speak to 20 people, the amount of information that I have after 20 people is huge. If I have now 200 people, then that's great. Is there a conference on? Is there an event on that you can get to and you can actually ask people some questions? It's great. You can, even if you've got no money, you can just rock up outside a conference and just ask people on the street. So don't think that you can't sort of have like cheap hacks to get through some of this. So let's go through what an interview looks like. Do they have the problem? You know, it's very important. Are they trying to solve this problem? Are they actively looking for a solution to get rid of this problem? Will they spend money? And then how much are they willing to spend to solve this problem? Or how much does this problem cost them so that we can actually supply a solution cheaper than that? And if we can't, then they're not going to use our services anyway. So we really need to figure these stuff out. All right, perfect assumptions are never correct. We're going to close the loop. The faster you get to learn stuff, the better chance you have of success. And this is the summary. Surveys don't work. The information is just not good enough. So you need to do these customer interviews, and you can really understand how interested people are and apply the mom test. Get the book, read the book. I'm sure there's probably on YouTube as well. If you can afford the book, it's a great resource. So that is it from me for the actual direct delivery of this content. I know it's a lot of stuff, but it's a very important stuff. And I'll just jump back now over so I can see some of the chat. Okay, so now I can see the chat, folks. Is that okay, Keith? Can you see that? I might
Awesome
stop
stuff.
sharing now.
I'm also learning, taking notes from you. I can really see you from the product UI UX kind of like perspective on building a product that is human centric, that is high valuable if you launch a product, and that resonates a lot about the value and also attacking with aha moment with all the future build eventually. There's some really cool questions that's really relevant to the topic. Why don't you pick some of them?
I'm just trying to look through some of those questions. Was there one in particular that you saw? Sorry, what is the biggest?
I think
what is the biggest roadblock that you've had personally when it comes to customer validation, and how did you get around it? The reality is sometimes it's hard to get to your particular customer because they may be busy. So if I'm trying to get to like an executive in a large organization, they can be difficult to get to. And the reason they're difficult to get to is because they don't answer their phones. They have an assistant, like an EA, who takes care of their day-to-day operations so that they can focus on more of the strategic work. Now, how do I get to speak to the executive when the executive assistant says they're busy with the business and you're some startup guy that doesn't add value to my boss, so I'm going to gatekeep access to him? And that's a very common thing where people try to protect the time of busy people. The people that we really want to speak to, people will try to protect their time. And they think they're helping them. Now that executive, that founder of a company, they may be happy to speak to you, but there's like a bouncer in between. One of my tactics is to time hack, right? Because what you find is a lot of the EAs and stuff are employees, and they will leave at like 6 o'clock or they will leave at 5 o'clock. But the more entrepreneurial person might leave a bit early. So I try to figure out like when the assistant is working, and I'll ring before I think they're at work or after they're at work, and I'll chance my arm a little bit to try to bypass them, because when the assistant isn't there, then that executive generally will pick up the phone. So you know that sort of before office hours, just at the end of the day office hours is one that I find. One of the other ones is getting a density of people. So my advice around that is to look for industry events and to come to them. Just hang out at the front of them if you don't have very much cash. Another great hack is to like go on the show floor of a conference and have a T-shirt that says, I want to know about X or Y, and just knock them up like $20 T-shirts and say, tell me about your problems, and then just randomly asking people, offering people a free coffee. I like to reward people for giving me their time. So I'd say, I would love to talk to you for a few minutes. Can I buy you a coffee? I really love to understand the business. Now, if they're not interested at all, that doesn't mean they're not a customer in the future. It just means that they're not open. There's a concept called foundation customers, and a foundational customer is someone who will work with you on your product because they're very interested in seeing it come to market. And you want to find these types of customers through this customer discovery who are like friendly customers that if you break something or whatever, they'll be supportive and they'll help you launch the product. Versus the more straight transactional customer who's like, I just want to pay for the product, it must work, it must be, because you can make them unhappy very quickly. So trying to classify those ones would be ones that I would do. Okay, let me see if there's another question. Okay. Can we have the slides afterwards? Yes, I believe the slides will all be available. They're in a Google Drive, and I think all of the content that's being delivered is going to be available for everyone. The videos are also recorded and will be released on YouTube later, so you'll be able to rewatch these at your leisure or share them with a team member if they've not been here. Then I think that's one of the big things we want to do. Singapore co-founder, GameFi project for sustainability. Rafa. One thing about like when you say GameFi for sustainability, one thing I'd say about it can be difficult when you have like multi-party solutions to understand the customers. And I see this a lot when I see people who've got like maybe a multi-sided marketplace. So I'm GameFi for sustainability. So I've now got a sustainability, customer to have the outcome, but then I have like the game itself must be good or interesting, or I'm going to be like a game platform. So you're trying to create like something that's truly unique and try to balance those out. Sometimes you need to look at it as like a 3-stage rocket launch. Like rocket launch 1 is potentially just getting, the game out or understanding that sort of game service that you're going to be delivering to game makers. And then like, well, that will then give me stage 2. And then stage 3 is that sustainability part. But you want to validate all of those because that once it's up and in orbit, it all works together. But try to think of it as in that stir step. So level 0 to level 1, give me some distinct stirs and be like, well, how can I determine what that looks like and how can I come back? Well, a couple other bits of advice I would say is at the end of your conversation, make sure you ask for subsequent conversations. Would you be okay with me reaching out to you at some point in the future and we'll go for another cup of coffee or whatever? Because if they say no, that's a very big signal. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, so you may think you've got a lot of information, but if I'm unwilling to value exchange with time, then that doesn't matter. So like I don't care about Facebook likes because they're valueless. If you give me an email address, there's value in an email address, but it's a low value action. But if I have someone's time, that's a high value, especially if they're like a busy person who's willing to go and spend time with you. That's a high value exchange, which really shows that there is demand for what we're trying to do. Somebody said because it's a network business. Yeah, network businesses, the issue in network business is about building up both sides of the marketplace to like the steady state at the end. So it's obvious up here, but it's difficult to understand how to match those sort of customers up. And that's what I mean about those stirs. The more market participants, the more difficult it is in a network business. So do we start researching stage 2 or are we more stable with stage 1 or should we just pivot along the way? Look, there's a thing about like, can I do it in the future? And so let's say that you wanted to have sustainability and that is the primary thing the reason that you are doing this, and you don't do any validation because you're focusing on the game part, the first stage of the rocket. If you can't do the third stage of the rocket, then what was the point in doing stage 1 in the first place? So I would say that there is feasibility checking, but you don't necessarily need to have, your entire plan figured out. But you want to have like a rough idea that there's still demand for that stage 3 value. But what we're trying to figure out is the stir step, the feasibility of bringing this out. Now we will pivot and we will change over time, but pivoting is generally, pivoting isn't doing something completely different. Folks, pivoting is changing your tact. So think of it more like a boat where you've got wind that's blowing the wrong direction. So then you have to change what you do with the sails to deal with that wind, but you're still trying to roughly get in the same direction. People who just change their idea completely, like I'm GameFi, and then tomorrow they're like I'm an AI company and I'm doing this, and then the next day after that they're going to be a chat system. That's not pivoting in my book. Because what you're doing is you're throwing away that primary business idea. You're not trying to see like, where does this fit? Think of it like a jigsaw puzzle in the same puzzle. You're starting to just sort of jump from A to B. And it's very difficult to take learnings in those big jumps because you jump so far that everything you've done before is almost irrelevant. And that's why the pivot when you're not just tacking is extremely difficult to see as value. So I'm not 100% certain if I've answered that correctly, but at a generic level, it's extremely difficult to give people answers about whether they should or they shouldn't. One thing I would say is you don't know. We have an opinion. I have an opinion, and this is the reason we're going to speak to these people. So stage one might be a completely different customer, just to be clear. Stage one might be small to medium businesses. So like I did a product, which doesn't exist anymore, called The Locker, and it was like a social network thing in Boston. And the customer was a stage 3 customer, and the customers were Nike and Under Armour. Okay, and so it was all about like sports equipment and what you were wearing to the game. And so the users were like youth players aged from about 16 to about 25 in the pro leagues and all that sort of stuff, and scouting and all that jazz, and around the sport and the equipment and the gear. So that's like your stage 1. Then your stage 2 was about trying to make sure we had enough statistical density in certain areas. So coming on board to Phil to be able to give meaningful insights and build an analytics dashboard. And then phase 3 was very much about like, will Nike, will Under Armour pay for this sort of service? So if we didn't validate at the very start, if Nike or Under Armour were going to validate this, we would never have had a revenue structure that would pay for everything, because the first stage 1 rocket was required. Think of it like I'm selling a roof on top of a building. Right, that's my primary value, but the roof only has value because the building exists. Okay, but I still want to know that you want the roof, because otherwise you could just have walls with no roof. You know what I mean? So it's really difficult to answer that in a very descriptive way. So unless there's any other questions, we might sort of finish up this session, and then we might move to pitching. So I'll give it like 2 seconds to see if anything else pops up. And if not, we'll switch over to the next presentation.
Cool. Thanks a lot. So while we are shifting to the next section, I actually have like a couple of really quick 5 questions for you around the previous topic. Since a lot of people, they are either like developers or business people, they think like, I just build stuff. I just want to sell my idea and that's it. Right, which is very counterintuitive. That's what you said, right? Spend some time to learn about who you're serving, their problem. There's one book that I like a lot. It's called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. To learn about who you are you serving, what's the objective, why are you doing that before you do the how and what, right? Which is really relevant about what you just mentioned. Real quick 5 questions. Number 1 question is like, how many people should you talk to? How many rounds of like validation should you do?
It's so subjective, realistically. Like think about like a hunter as well, right? If you're a hunter, or like think of this, you have a company and you need to feed the staff. So you need to go hunt, prey. You might be a vegetarian. I don't mean to upset anyone, but you need to go hunt. But if I'm an elephant hunter, I only need to get like so many elephants, and only so many elephants exist. But if I'm a rabbit hunter, there's lots of rabbits, and I need to get lots of rabbits in order to feed the same size of team. So the concept is like, if I'm going to make $1 million, how many of each customer exists and how many I need to get to. So from a broad spectrum, the more the better. Okay, of your target customer type, but definitive numbers, it's hard to say. You could be constrained, but like I would want, tens of customers at least. And if it's a retail thing, I'd want hundreds of customers. Okay. You can get through a lot of people if you're happy to interrupt people. I think a lot of developers, and like I remember there was a point where I was afraid to stand in front of a room of 10 people and explain on a whiteboard, what I was doing. And these days I don't have that anymore. Like I'm happy to stand on a street corner and ask people their opinion and interrupt them. So it strongly depends, but I would say that you probably need more than you think. So whatever you think, whatever that number is, it's probably double what that number is. But think of it like it's a fog of war. When most people here would play computer games, you've got limited visibility. And the more you speak to people, the more people you speak to, the more that fog dissipates, because you get more and more information about the world. So the more people you see, is basically like they are clearing that fog for you. But I don't know a hard number. There's no definitive hard
number. Right.
No, yeah.
The other question for you is like, whose job, who should be the one leading and interacting the validation?
Look, I believe everyone should. Okay. I think that if you can record the content, it's great because you can share it with other people. You may have some more introverted people in the team who are uncomfortable doing these things. But the point that I would make to you is this customer discovery skill is a life skill that you will find extremely beneficial through your entire career. So set startups aside, set Web3 aside, the ability for you to ask these open-ended questions to get this information flow is a life skill that will improve your career. So I recommend that you try to move outside your comfort zone and grow your career and your aspirations. This is the type of stuff that can help you get a promotion in the future, even if you stayed in your salaryman job.
Awesome advice from you. Let's take a break. Let's get some free water.
Yeah.
So we'll get up with the food section.
Yeah, I don't want to run too far over, so we'll take like a 2-minute break and then we'll get back into the pitching.
Awesome.